So in this video, I'm going to show you how to create your survey. The first thing you want to make sure is that you go to the Canvas Lab website. So let's start there. And then you want to go to Google Drive. So it's drive.google.com. You could search for it, that's what I usually do. And then I'm going to click on the plus sign and Google Forms. Okay, so in your Google form, this is your survey, you want to have a consent page, the actual measurement that's going to focus on your DV, a demographic section, did I say page? I meant section, and a debrief section, and a section where people who decide not to consent to participate, where they would go. Okay, so keep that in mind, you have these sections. So let's start off with the consent page, and I'm going to just name this consent form. Now this section you're going to name based on what you're measuring. So for example, I'm going to call it respect for family. You might call it math, algebra section, whatever makes most sense for your study, right? Then you're going to have, oops, I accidentally added a question. You want to click on this icon. It looks like an equal sign. You click on that, and then you have your demographic questions, and then, almost finally, debrief, and then finally, something like, name this section, section 5, you decided not to participate. Okay, the consent page, their form, this is what the participants are first going to see, right? This is where they read what the study is about, they decide whether they want to participate or not. The debrief section is where you tell them, this is what we actually were hoping to find, these were our hypotheses, and where you give them some contact information where they could contact you and me if they have any questions. Okay, so for the consent form, I have some handouts. I know it looks like a lot, but you have 2 weeks to complete this. It's just how it's spread out. You have the consent form, so I'm going to open that first. I'm going to open that in a new tab. And I'm going to open this form. It's best if you download the file and then open it. Make sure you have Microsoft Word. I will be giving you files in that format. And you can see I have that open here. I'm going to put this on the right side of the screen and delete these other pages. Don't save. Don't save. Okay, so for the consent form, anything in blue, you need to update to match your study, and anything highlighted. Okay, so make sure you go through that first as a team. You make modifications to this form, save it, then you copy and paste everything except the header. Let me show you, this is a header, right? So you don't need to copy that header, just a text. You go to the consent form, and here where it says form description, click on it and paste. Now notice how it didn't paste, it doesn't look that great after pasting. Make sure you take some time and modify this to make it more readable or easier to read. And double check that you updated all the information that you had to update. So once you've gone through this and made it look nice, you want to add one question. You add a question by clicking on this plus sign. And I'm just going to make it simple. Do you consent to participate in this study? Now, keep in mind, Google will suggest some options, not the best options always. Let me add them all. Yes, no, maybe. We don't want a maybe. So you just want yes or no. And you want to make this question required. So click on that. And based on how they respond, you want their choices to differ, their paths in your survey to differ. So I'm going to click on these three dots here, go to section based on answer. If they say yes, continue, right? It says continue to next section. But if they say no, I wanted to go to you decided not to participate, section 5. Now I'm going to go to section 5 now and add some text. I'm just going to say, thank you for your time. You decided not to participate. If this was a mistake, please go back and choose yes. Simple as that. Now, this is an accident. I included a question here by accident, so make sure you revise, you delete anything that doesn't make sense. But one thing I do want you to make while you're here, one change, is you see on the debrief page, it says continue to next section. That doesn't make sense, right? They finish the study, they get the debrief form. If they don't close that window and they click next, it'll take them to you decided not to participate. We don't want that. Here at the bottom, we want it to say submit form. So you just click on it and you change it to submit form. Now for the debrief, since we're here, let's go ahead and edit that. I'm going to close this. Make sure you save this if this is your form. I'm going to go back, again, under week 3. I'm not sure why it's showing me that again. Back. Okay, I see. I opened that in a new tab. So open it in a new tab again, or however you want. And just because I didn't point this out earlier, to download, you click on this blue link on top of the preview of the file, right? This is a preview, so in some cases this is helpful because then you can read the form or the reading right in Canvas. But here you want to download it because you're going to be editing these files. Make sure you back up any files you download, you edit, because if you lose that, then you're going to have to redo the work later on if you need to make any modifications. Okay, so this is open. Okay, notice in this sheet, anything you need to highlight is not in blue, it's in a light gray, and it's italicized, or it's italicized. So this section, for example, it has, it's kind of nice, it has a section for you to enter the title. Everything else you just need to delete and replace with whatever is relevant for your study. So here, the title to your study, give it a title for both the consent and debrief form. Here, what were you looking for, what you're hoping to find, and here you have your contact information. Choose one team member, one lead member, one that's most likely to check their email and respond or contact me. And here you have my information in case they want to contact me, right? So here, this actually pastes over pretty nicely. I'm not sure why that pastes over nicely and the consent form doesn't, but here you don't have to do any editing after pasting. You've done that, you're done with the consent form, you're done with the debrief form. Okay, so now, oh, I pasted that in the wrong section. So be careful with that. Okay, so now I'm gonna do my my main DV questions, right? So keep in mind, this is gonna vary based on study. And if you have a study that presents participants with one statement versus another, so for example, the growth mindset statement questions, the mindset statement questions, some people get a growth mindset statement, some people get a fixed mindset statement. In that case, you need to create 2 surveys. I would say first create one and then duplicate it. And then some people here are going to get the growth mindset statement here in this section here. And some people are going to get the fixed mindset statement, right? Keep that in mind. Now, let me actually mention. So for the math questions, I would keep it short answer, so open-ended. Enter the question here, 2x plus whatever it is, plus 4 equals 12. And then you will have to go through this manually and check the responses, right? It's going to be a team effort. For the Respect for Family, it would be something like, well, actually, let me show you where to look for this information. Clear that, close that. Now, for all studies, you can go to this document here. Actually, it's a page in Canvas, Research Project IV, and DV measurements. Click on that, find your study. So I believe this is option 5. Click on the DV. Now keep in mind, for some, I give you the scale for the DV. For others, I give you instructions on how to create your DV. So for example, the gaming one, the one where the students watch an informational video and they're led to think they're going to have access to the video later on, but they end up not having access, that you have to do some creating on your part. In some studies, I give you the DV, right? So in this one, the scale, here you have the questions. These, if you're using actually I'm using Respect for Family for the examples, and let me go to that. I'm going to copy these directions, right? Using the scale below, blah, blah, blah. If you don't have these directions, you want to make sure that you write them up, that you include some kind of directions. Using the scale below, please respond to the best of your ability. Please respond based on your experience with using social media. Include some directions. Most people will figure it out, but you still want to make sure you include that. It's a good habit to form now. And you can't copy, well, I guess you could copy and paste that part, but you will have to create each one. For the Likert scale questions, first add the question. I'm going to say not multiple choice and go with the linear scale. Here's a question. 1 is not at all important, and 5 is very important. So based on using Google Forms, my experience is that it usually works out better when we use this because it automatically assigns numerical values to each choice. The drawback of this choice is that it doesn't label 2, 3, and 4, right? But something that you could do that I highly recommend, actually do want you to do this, is either describe 1 equals not at all important, 3 equals somewhat important, 5 equals very important. Something like this, right? If you have 2 and 4 labeled, you can go ahead and do that. Or you can do, well, actually I won't show you this because this is optional. Or you can upload an image of this scale you have here, but this is fine too, right? You don't need to be fancy. This is fine. And then that way they know for every question they're responding to, a 3 is somewhat important. So you would add all your questions for your DV here, and then for your demographic questions, right? So the DV here, okay, I already mentioned that, but here is where for most of you, your IV is going to be found, right? Participant sex, gender identity, ethnicity. If you have an IV that's not listed as an option, that's not covered in the demographic questions I'm going to ask you to include, make sure you include it, right? For the mindset people, you're going to include that by having 2 different versions of this survey, right? You're going to cover that IV that way. If you have an IV that, like gaming, are you a gamer? Yes and no. You should include that here in the demographic question section. The reason why I include this section last is because I don't want my participants to be biased by these questions as they're completing the math test, as they're completing these cultural questions, as they're responding to these other DV-related questions that you're all working on. Because even asking, are you male or female, what's your gender identity, what's your ethnicity, might lead them to start thinking, hey, Are you comparing different ethnic groups? Or I'm catching on to what you're looking at. Or they might make the wrong guess, which is also bad, right? So we don't want them to worry about or start trying to decipher what the study's about in regards to your IVs at least early on, right? They probably will by that point, but they'll be near the end, almost done. So anyways, now let's go back to the Canvas Lab web page. Okay, in this case, I'm just going to click on Home. Again, week 3. Now I'm looking for the demographic. So here it is, right? So here's week 3. The demographics questions, and you'll notice I have 4 questions for you. One about ethnicity, one about participant sex, one about gender identity, and one about what is your age. I'm okay if you decide to do some of these as forced choice questions, even if they're not designed that way. So for example, for ethnicity, if you're focusing on recruiting Armenian and Asian participants because you're comparing them, that's fine with me if you have those as options and then other or neither, right? Because in that case, I would actually encourage you to target your recruitment. Focus on recruiting people who identify as Armenian and Asian. Yes, it's not randomly sampling, but you're focusing on comparing those 2 ethnic groups, and you don't, at least for that study, if you chose to compare those 2 groups, you don't care about the other ethnicities. You don't care about recruiting the other ethnicities, I should say, right? So if you decide to do that, that's fine with me. For gender identity, because of how you don't know how people are going to identify, I think it's best to keep that open-ended. Age should just be open-ended. Otherwise, you have to list all the possible ages, and you would include those questions in this section, right? So for example, actually, I'm going to do the short answer. What is your age? Make sure to include some directions here. Please answer the following questions. I notice I misspelled that. For this one, if you decided to do forced choice questions, I would use multiple choice instead of the linear scale. What is your ethnicity? Latinx. See, here's the issue, right? Maybe they don't identify as Latinx because they just don't. Then you have to say something like this, Latino, or Hispanic. And let me add an option, white or European American, right? So it kind of gets, ethnic labels they don't work very well. That's why I usually leave ethnicity open-ended. And then after you recruit participants, you can kind of go through it and categorize people based on the categories you had in mind. So for example, if somebody responded Latinx, Latina, Hispanic, Salvadoran, Guatemalan, Peruvian, you can decide, okay, anybody who is from Latin America or has Latin American heritage, I'm gonna categorize as Latinx, right? So that's kind of the benefit of having it open-ended. Same thing as with gender identity, right? You could say, well, as a broad category, I'm gonna use non-cis or non-binary, right? And then you could take anybody that would fit into that category, and after the fact, put them in those categories, if it's one of your IVs, and you leave it open to have people identify as report as they identify, right? You don't force it on them. So you would add those questions. Again, make sure any IV that's not already in here, you're adding it in. Are you a gamer? Yes or no? Then they have the debrief form. Then they have this in case they don't agree, and you're almost done in terms of designing this. Okay, one thing I should have mentioned at the beginning is how to share this with your teammates. You click on these three dots next to your, well, if you have a photo here, next to your photo, but these top three dots, click on that, add collaborators, then add them. If you want me to look at, if you want me to take a look at your survey, you need to add me in this way, or print it to PDF somehow, make a PDF out of this page. Otherwise, I can't see it. If you copy this link here and you send me that, I can't open the survey, right? Now, you could send me the link as a participant, which is an option, but let me show you how to do that, right? So you're done, you finish all the edits, all the teammates have had a chance to look at it. If a teammate has not even looked at it, you need to let me know. It's their responsibility to also help with the survey. So, okay, you're done with edits, you're ready to send it out. Click on send, click on this link, the chain link, shorten it. I'm not sure why they don't just automatically give you that shorter link, but you have to click on it to get the shorter link, then copy. Now this link is a link you're going to send to people, however you send it, wherever you post it, to recruit participants. My recommendation is also to include a blurb explaining that you're doing this for a class assignment. Give them a brief overview of what the study is about and about how long it's going to take. This shouldn't take people that long, 5 minutes, right? Maybe a little bit more for the ones that have them watch a video or play a game, but include how much time and start recruiting early, right? Because it's going to feel like, this will be easy. I'll just put it up there and I'll get participants right away. No, you have to be very active about participant recruitment, especially because so many other students in so many other classes and so many other universities are doing the same thing, right? So be active, start recruiting now. If you have any questions about what we're doing here or any of these forums, let me know. Remember, you all have to include these questions even if gender is not one of your topics. At least these 4 questions. Make sure you're including any other questions you need if you changed your IV or if they're not covered here. If you have the mindset option, make sure you create 2 different surveys, one for growth and one for fixed. Make one first and then duplicate it and then make that change to the text. And yeah, that's it. Good luck.